Hello, everyone. Warm welcome to our virtual roundtable session on the topic Amplifying Enterprise Digital Transformation with Low Code. I hope you and your loved ones are safe and sound. My name is Tribin, and I'm your host for the day. I recently came across this quote by Alan Levi, who is the CEO of Box, the storage service provider. And this was made in 2017, where he mentioned that the last 10 years of IT have been all about changing the way people work. And the next 10 years, it will be all about transforming your business. Now, this struck with me. Obviously, this was made before COVID started. COVID had an impact on our life. Um, but how has it changed us, right? That's the major question. Last year, around the same time, Jason had actually joined us for a session where we were discussing on how to handle or survive the initial impact of COVID. And here, 1 year later, we are here to have a look at what has changed and how that is going to impact the way we will do business in the next few years. So again, I would like to welcome all of you to the session, and let me take you through the basics of it. This is the basic hygiene activities that we basically say in all our sessions. This is a interactive panel discussion. So slides are for placeholders, and we will be discussing on whatever is mentioned in the slides, candid perspective around that. You will be on mute. All attendees will be on mute, and you can ask your questions through the questions tab on the left-hand side of your panel. There are a couple of polls that we have set up, which would help us understand you better and to tailor the conversation according to that. So please do participate in those. Also, if you have any issues in terms of audio or video, just refresh. That sorts out most of the things. And there will be a recording for this entire session, which we will send in a couple of days after the session. So with that, let's meet our panelist, which I'm very, very excited about. The cumulative experience of the three guests who are there with me right now is about 65 years in tech. That is a huge amount of experience for us to dip into. Obviously, that has run in parallel, but then I'm very excited to ask them questions which would give us a perspective of how they see what the future looks like in terms of digital transformation. To begin with, I have Jerry Rapp here with me, who is the CIO of Town Pump. Town Pump is a chain of truck stops, gas stations, casinos, hotels, and convenience stores based out of US, and it was established in 1953. So it's safe to say that it has seen the way technology has evolved for the longest period of time and survived it all, and basically making the best use of it. And Jerry himself has an experience of over 25 years. For about 20 years, he was with Fidelity Investment, one of the largest investment companies based out of across the globe, actually. And he has risen through the ranks in the IT side of things from there. And for the past 6 years, he has been with Town Pump as their CIO. Welcome, Jerry, to the session. Thank you for agreeing to be a part of this, and it is a pleasure to have you here with us. Jerry, you're on mute. Yeah.
Yep. Thank you. Definitely looking forward to the session.
Thank you very much. Jerry, before we get started or I get into the other panelists, right, I have a quick question for you. You worked with a large global financial services company for 20 years, and then you moved into something which is completely different in terms of domain and probably in terms of the philosophy they have towards technology and using technology. I'm assuming it would have been quite a shift. I would love to hear from you as to what your major challenges were, what your experience was moving from a domain to different domain with respect to your role.
Definitely. Great question. And I think there's a lot of things that stay the same, and there's a few things that are different. The fundamentals of running technology, I think, are the same. The differences are, you have different staffing models, you have different, budget models and metrics when you move from financial to like a retail type environment. But the focus is the same, right? When you come on board, it's important for us to understand our revenue streams, understand our data, and then we put our process in place to protect those revenue streams, protect that data, and really make them as efficient as possible. And I think that focus is the same really across the board. Interesting when you look at different business models, one of the things that is always intriguing is it's amazing how much technology it takes to pump a gallon of gas. There's a lot of moving parts in the background that a lot of people don't see. So it's always interesting to see that. So I've enjoyed the different business models and, learning the different business models. But in the end, the business of running technology is the business of running technology.
All right, great. Thanks for that, Jerry. And once again, welcome to the session. Next up is Jason. Like I mentioned earlier, we have had Jason in multiple discussions that we have had over the past couple of years. He's the president of Intellyx, an analyst firm that specializes in digital transformation and disruptive technologies that deliver digital transformation. He's a leading author as well as a keynote speaker, and he has about 30 plus years of experience. He has seen tech right from the 80s. And he's always extremely good to talk to in terms of gaining insights from his experience.
Thanks, Trevin. It's great to be here.
Welcome to the session, Jason. It's lovely to have you here.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Jason, a question to you as well. And I will break this question into two. I wanted your inputs on how digital transformation, the word digital transformation and the expectation from that word across different organizations have evolved from the time you started to just before COVID. And the reason why I want to stick to just before COVID is because most of our discussion will be what happens after COVID, right? So
yeah, that's a good
I would
question,
love to hear from you on what your thoughts are
easily
around
take
that.
the concept of digital transformation and sort of look for examples of it in the past. And you could say that digital technologies first became relevant to the business in the 1940s with ENIAC, right, the first digital computer. But clearly, when we talk about digital transformation today, we're not talking about, hey, we finally get to use vacuum tubes, right? That's not really what we're talking about. What we're talking about in the context of digital transformation today, and really for the last 10 years or so, is the fact that organizations, companies of different sizes, are now able to leverage a range of different software-based technologies to better meet customer needs. So we like to say digital transformation is software empowered, but it's customer driven. Right? Organizations are now able to transform themselves organizationally to better meet customer needs, break down organizational silos. And when you break down organizational silos, you're also breaking down technological silos. So this wouldn't be possible if it weren't for a whole range of new digital technologies, from cloud computing to better front-end technologies like HTML5 to better enterprise applications like SaaS-based applications, right? There's many different moving parts on the technology side, but it's really not about technology. It's about customers and meeting customer needs.
Mm-hmm. Lovely. So technology is the enabler. It doesn't matter how complex or simple it is, but at the end of the day, we are trying to serve the customer better. We are trying to get more revenue out of whatever we are doing, right? Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Jason, and welcome to the session once again. And finally, we have Tejas here with us. Tejas is developer evangelist at Zoho. In his role over the past decade, he has connected with different customers across the world, trying to help them solve business problems using technology across the spectrum in terms of no code to pro code, everything. And I have been working closely with Tejas for the past couple of years, and it's fascinating to talk to him about tech. Good morning and welcome to the session, Tejas. Hey, Tejas, while developer evangelist is a term that people within the IT spectrum might be familiar with, folks outside of it might not be really familiar with what you do per se, right? So can you help us understand what your typical day looks like? What exactly does developer evangelism mean?
Every day is a little bit different. I would say ultimately an evangelist is really just a glorified cheerleader, I would say. Every day, talking to different customers, maybe influencers and industry analysts like Jason, getting an understanding of what's going on in the market, what our customer needs, and ideally putting that together in terms of planning out a roadmap for what we want to develop and provide for our customers going forward. So I guess it's usually every day is a little bit different, but ultimately talking to customers is probably the majority of the day, just to understand what's going good for them, what's going bad for them, what their pain points are in terms of maybe adoption or maybe just product issues or anything along those lines. But just finding ways to help them be more productive and leverage low-code platforms to make the organizations more streamlined.
Okay, so you're basically the bridge that covers what the customer needs vis-a-vis what happens or what should happen with the product that we serve, right? How best can we serve that?
Basically, yeah.
Great, thank you, and welcome once again, Tejas. So that's our panelists. I have a quick poll, which again is something that we launch with all our sessions to try and understand the kind of people who have joined us. So the question will be on your screen right now. What is the function that you represent, right? Because eventually we are going to talk about low code, and low code is something that serves across personas. If you are IT, you can use low code. If you are from the business team, you can. So we would love to know the split of people who are here today and try and understand how can we talk better. It's quite even, Stevens. We have about 55% from IT and about 44-ish from non-IT. I'll give it another 5 seconds and then we can get started. Yep. So it's about 55-45 in favor of IT. It's a good turnout, and it basically helps us have a neutral conversation, because at the end of the day, we are trying to share stories with respect to how digital transformation has moved, how technology has moved, and how low code fits into the entire piece, right? So thank you very much for that. Let me get into the meat of the discussion, and I'll start off with Jason, as a continuation to what you mentioned during the initial question, right? COVID happened. It hit all of us. There was a period where we were trying to cope rigorously. We were trying to survive. And then it's been almost a year since then, and a lot of nations, a lot of countries around the world have actually come out of it quite well, and others are struggling, but then still on their way out of it. So, Jason, what does digital transformation mean right now? You did mention that it's about enabling customer conversations and enabling customer experiences. So has the base will still remain the same, but then how has it changed in the larger scope of things, considering
We've been
there
talking
is a
about digital
pandemic around and there was a
transformation now, as I
sudden
mentioned,
push towards
for a
digital?
number of years, and business agility has always been one of the strategic benefits of business of digital transformation. But before COVID, a lot of the talk about agility was sort of high level, sort of theoretical. People sort of would say, yes, we want to be more agile, but they wouldn't really it didn't really connect to their day-to-day lives. Well, COVID changed that, right? All of a sudden, we have enormous disruption in the business environment, enormous disruption in all of our lives, and disruption drives agility, or really vice versa, right? If we have business agility in organizations, we're better able to deal with disruption. So all of this disruption came along, and it became pretty clear which types of businesses were better able to deal with the disruption and which ones struggled with it. Even within industries, right? Within financial services, new kinds of loan products and new kinds of government programs came along, not just in the US, but in Europe and other countries. And the banks had to rise to this challenge very quickly. The ones that were well on their way to digital transformation, especially the ones that were leveraging low code, were better able to deal with this kind of disruption. So now here we are pulling out of COVID in many places around the world, and we see ongoing disruption in the marketplace. Here in the US, I was just reading an article, we have a lot of turmoil in our housing market because there's been pent-up demand for housing, interest rates are low, so all these people are trying to buy houses, so there aren't enough houses, and there's all of this turmoil, and that kind of turmoil drives digital transformation, especially for organizations who've already been working on it. So really the bottom line is that digital transformation was a nice to have, a long-term strategic effort before COVID. Now it's an urgent must-have, a much more tactical sort of seat of the pants, what we need to drive our business and meet our customer needs today initiative. So digital transformation's really become much more real for many organizations.
All right, thanks. Thanks for that, Jason. Jerry, you are in the front line. You are trying to deal with. You are one of the. You are a CIO of a company which had to deal with firsthand, right? And your industry is also something that was fairly hit with respect to the pandemic. So, what does digital transformation mean to you right now, and how did you go about the whole? Has there been a shift owing to the situation that's going out there?
I guess when I think of digital transformation, you can look at it in two categories. One that Jason just talked about from a customer point of view, and also, talking about it internally. And, as I was putting some thoughts together, especially around the Creator platform, I focused more on the internal side of the house. And, and you asked the question about the external piece of it. And, we definitely had, you see shifts just like anyone else does, is that, when people want to pay, trying to get that to be self-service or contactless are important. Whether it be a mobile application as well to interact with your end user. So I think a lot of what we're going through is not going to be unique to us or any of our businesses. But when we look at the other piece internally, I think digital is part of a process or part of a smaller part of an overreaching process. And what I mean by that is that internally at corporate, I have two main goals. One is how do we get the right data to the right person at the right time in the right format and in the most efficient method. And then the other piece is that how do we get information to people in less than 5 minutes? So you have a question and you need data. How long does it take you to get that data? And so when we look at the platform, we look at processes and data, right? Is that if we understand our data, there's always going to be a lot of information out there that doesn't fit nicely into a platform or a packaged application. And there's going to be processes that use that data that are going to be tough to buy off the shelf. Mm-hmm. So that's what we're looking at right now is, what is that data that sits out in spreadsheets and other formats that makes sense to put into a system? And then what are the processes of using that data and making it available that can be improved as well? And so when we talk about digital transformation internally, that's what we look at. And that's what we're tackling right now within Town Pump.
All right. So I'll borrow the phrase that you used, the right data at the right time to the right person. And that's the focus right now, because that is what eventually drives business decisions for you, better business decisions for you.
Correct.
All right. Thanks. Thanks, Jerry. So Tejas, I'll come to you. Now, we have already defined digital transformation, what it means at this point in time. You talk to a lot of customers. And I assume a lot of those conversations are around trying to figure out how do I get better in terms of what I'm doing with my digital technologies? How do I invest better? So what are the top 3 challenges that you see your clients, your customers coming to you with? What are they trying to solve?
I guess if you kind of go up one level, basically one of the biggest issues that organizations tend to have is a lot more cultural than maybe even practical. Maybe leadership team says, we need to go down this route and it's, for everyone's best interest, but maybe that sentiment isn't really, all the way believed by everybody at every level of the organization. So what I mean by that is basically, having a culture of constantly looking for ways to improve things, because a lot of digital transformation is you have a process, it works, it might not be the best thing in the world, but it's getting the job done. And not everybody is the type of person who's going to say, this process could be made better in X, Y, and Z way. Some people just, this is what it is. I'm going through the motions, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? And so culturally, you should kind of have that mentality of always finding ways of making things better at every level of the organization. And once you have that kind of mindset, then a lot more digital transformation initiatives, whether it's process-based or just digitization or integrations or wherever, those kind of things start bubbling up, and those ideas start being kind of percolated a lot more through the organization. So culture has to be like far and away number one. Just everyone has to buy into that mentality of we want to make things better and be constantly evolving, regardless of the tools you use or how you get to it. But just that mentality is important. Secondary to that, I think a lot of people nowadays, there's maybe 1.5 million different pieces of software and technology that you could leverage to digitize things. And first, it can be like drinking from a fire hose. There's too much out there, and it's hard to navigate what's right, what's wrong, and then identifying what's a scalable solution, what's a cost-effective solution, what's going to work for us, and integrate with all the things that we need. So there's 1 million different ways to do it. Generally, I would say start small, and when you look into vendors that you look to partner with, especially in digital transformation things, really considering a vendor not just as a piece of software or an organization you're doing business with, but really as a technology partner is important. So having a close relationship with that vendor, understanding maybe what their roadmap is, what their philosophy is, what their business record is, these kinds of things are important, because what ends up happening is if a company may get sold or spin off or go out of business, you're kind of just locked in a lot of these situations. And so I think a lot of people spend a lot of time worrying about like individual features and functionality sometimes, and not so much of, is this a good company to go into business with? And maybe all the features aren't there yet, but do I have faith that they're going to get there over time? Can be an important thing, and ultimately sometimes a lot more successful long term. And so I would say good vendor partnership is important. And oftentimes, probably one of the biggest things I hear is, especially from smaller customers who think that they don't have the leverage to maybe command a good vendor relationship. That's not necessarily the case. Talking to somebody in sales at the organization or support, and just really getting a feel for how do they treat their customers, how do they respond to me, are they willing to go above and beyond in certain situations. That kind of stuff is important, because that's going to be what your experiences are going to be over time. So small companies can build good vendor relationships as well. It's not only for your Fortune 50 or Fortune 500 companies out there. And then maybe your third one is going to be strategy is always important, I guess. Kind of going back to the culture piece, if everybody is kind of frantically looking for problems and trying to solve them on their own without any kind of central strategy or game plan, then you end up with maybe too many solutions out there, or maybe not scalable solutions, or then you deal with like security and auditing and integration nightmares down the line. So there does need to be a couple kind of champions within an organization who and everyone takes everybody's ideas in, digests them, and figures out, all right, cool, well, we have these dozen problems we want to solve, prioritize these, and this is what we're going to use, and this is how we're going to kind of solve it all at once, rather than every team running around like chickens with their head cut off, basically. So those are my 3 challenges.
Got it. So the common theme around this is to kind of streamline everything, whether it's from culture, technology point of view, or strategy point of view. So that brings me to the element of apps. Right. One of the things that we see is a lot of apps in organizations, some trying to save the same issue from multiple angles because they are siloed altogether. In fact, we did a recent survey around application development from our side, and it was attended by, there were almost 800 plus respondents from across the world, from both IT and LOB teams. And one of the key insights, these are the 2 key insights that we found from the survey. The first one being at least 25%, so that's about 200 plus respondents from different companies had at least 10 apps to build or maintain every month. So that's a huge chunk of application that we are talking about. And the second one is, what are they using those apps for, which is predominantly around workflow automation or business process automation and management, and data, like Jerry mentioned, data analytics and removing data silos. So that takes me to the next question. And Jason, I'll probably shoot it at you first and then move to Jerry. What role do you see apps playing in digital transformation? How can organizations be smart about it? And
it's important to place apps into
if
the
you could
proper
take a stab on that,
context
then
of
we can
digital
build from there.
transformation, because there are a lot of different things going on, and one of the challenges with digital transformation is sort of understanding the various parts of the challenge. So some of it boils down to just the vocabulary we use. Tejas mentioned digitization, for example, and digitization means essentially a transformation of your data from analog to digital form. So if you're moving to paperless office, and you're taking filing cabinets and putting those files on your computer or in the cloud, that's digitization. So then there's digitalization, and digitalization transforms roles and processes, right? So if you have people, operating factory equipment, manually, and you change their role, so now they're using a computer display. That's an example of digitalization. But it also means transforming processes, and that's really where applications come in, as was just mentioned, right? That we're transforming the way that individuals deal with processes, so deal with workflows, interact with data, and interact with each other on an ongoing basis, both internally in the organization, as Jerry mentioned, employee focused, as well as interacting with customers and how customers interact with the organization. Those are all digitalization efforts that are transforming processes and roles. Now, digital transformation broadly is about transforming the business and its strategy. So as Ted just said, strategy is a key part of the story, but keep in mind, strategy is sort of the big picture. It's like, how are we going to compete in this new digital post-COVID era? What do we need to change in terms of how our organization is structured and how we leverage technology, broadly speaking? So that's going to necessarily impact the apps we're using and how people use technology, but the apps are just a component of the story. So don't get lost, don't focus only on the trees and then forget there's a forest there. But apps are a critical part of the story because really there's two sides of it, right? One is the people using the apps, as that's part of the digitalization. Their roles are changing as the processes change, and that's a core part of the transformation. But also how we go about building and deploying apps, those processes are also changing. And so low code and no code have these two sides of the coin, right? We're changing the way we're building and deploying apps, changing the value that apps have in the organization. We're also empowering people to change their roles in the processes as part of that digitalization effort.
Okay. Thanks, Jason. Jerry, your take on that, in the sense that within Town Pump, how do you see apps? You did mention it was all about data at this point in time, and I'm not necessarily sticking just to low-code apps or low-code application development, right? In general, in your business, how do you see apps contributing? Is it about optimization? Is it about more of enablement? What is your strategy around that?
It's an interesting question. And, we think of, I guess I think about, and when I did some Six Sigma work, is that we had this toolbox of tools. And I think it's the same as we have today, right? As if from a technology standpoint, you're going to get a variety of requests. And it's part of our job is to understand what are the tools that are available and selecting the correct tool to solve the opportunity or the challenge in front of you. And also, when you're selecting those tools, how does it fit into the big picture, right? Is it a major puzzle piece? It's a small puzzle piece. So when we look at our data and the structure of our data and how it has to interact with each other, we have to select systems that will interact the best with each other. So we minimize the movement of that data and the replication of that data as much as possible. And so when we look at the processes that use the data, we look at the data itself, and then we look at it from an overall architecture perspective, right? Then we try to make the right choice and select the right tool to handle the opportunity in front of us.
Got it. Okay. So the right tool to for the right opportunity. It's not like everything fits everything, which is absolutely true. As an extension to that, is something that I would want to address with respect to the challenges regarding application development, right? In fact, Tejas, a question is to you. What are the major challenges and what are the trends that you are seeing coming up from vendors like Zoho to address those challenges? So what is coming up in your conversations?
I think Jason touched on it a little bit. So one of the bigger challenges is when you get into digital transformation, and especially on the low code side, we're bringing in a lot of people that maybe previously didn't have contributions to it, right? It's all about democratization of being able to solve problems and take things closer to the business units. And so now you have these business users generally who don't have a lot of application development skills. And you're kind of asking them to, here's a tool, go use this tool to solve problems in your team or in your department, and have fun, right? And so naturally, these people are not the most they couldn't maybe not be the most tech savvy, maybe they don't have the best idea of application modeling and data design, and so having a platform that basically kind of has the right guardrails in place that IT can kind of control and emphasize will make things a lot easier. Otherwise, you'll basically end up getting, a lot of people or a lot of different teams and individuals within teams building things that either are, poorly designed applications or, have some sort of maybe compliance issues with integrations happening and data flowing around and customer information that shouldn't be, transferred or copied from one place to another. And so, broadly speaking, I would say education becomes ultimately, I guess, really important, and the platform should have the right guardrails in place to, enforce IT teams' basically policies in the application development process. And that kind of goes across the board for the more people that are building things, the more kind of guardrails you need to have in place to make sure that what they're building is actually long-term and sustainable and scalable for that team, and you're not having to reinvent the wheel every year, 2 years, 3 years down the line and rebuild stuff, because then you're kind of just wasting a little bit of time and effort.
Got it. So, Tejas, it's interesting you use the term democratization of application development. For the uninitiated, it's all about making application development accessible, right? One of the things that low-code platforms or technologies or no-code technologies brings to the table for organizations is the fact that it helps people who don't have a technology background build applications. And that is where it becomes critical, in the sense that an absence of guardrail, like Tejas just mentioned, would enable them to build bad applications, which might create more trouble as it scales up. So that is where it becomes important that whatever platform or technology that you use need to have enough guardrails, need to have enough options to ensure the integrity of apps that are being made. So Jason, I'll take that one step forward with you, right? Democratization. Is that an answer to one of the major pain points with respect to the speed at which organizations want to scale, to streamline their offering, to streamline the strategy that they have behind technologies?
Well,
Is that
democratization,
the
right,
way forward?
empowering
Is that one
a
of the
broader
major pieces
audience
in the
of
strategy?
people within the organization to create, manage, deploy applications is shifting the economics of applications within organizations, right? It used to be that it was the domain, app dev was part of the domain of IT, and it was tightly controlled, and and they, so it's a relatively small team that managed it, and it was also rather slow and expensive to create applications. So they weren't not, when an organization decided to build something internally as opposed to buy externally, they tended to be expensive and inflexible and cause other issues, and also led to application backlogs, right? Lines of business personnel would ask for new apps, and they would go on a long list of apps that were requested. So low code has shifted that quite a bit. So backlogs are now being the business is better able to both request new applications as well as help to build them. So it's shifted this, it's shifted the sort of the focus of who is doing what, which is that democratization process. So, but this really isn't anything new. Actually, if you think about the Lotus Notes era back in the late 80s, 90s, where organization was to get Lotus Notes, and here's this groupware application that enabled business users to create applications, and it led to all sorts of problems, because you'd have these applications that might be redundant, may have low quality, or may have security risks, and nobody was really keeping track of all of them. And that was one of the challenges with this earlier generation of application creation democratization. So as Tejas mentioned, we need to have guardrails today. In modern enterprise low-code platforms, it's not just about empowering people to build whatever apps they want and to let them do sort of a laissez-faire, anybody can do anything they want, because that's going to lead to this Lotus Notes problem. It's really about shifting the roles around a bit, so IT is still responsible for security, for compliance, for quality, but empowering a greater range of people to build apps within the context of those guardrails. So it's achieving a new balance in the organization in terms of who does what and who contributes to which applications.
Got it. Thanks, Jason. So, Jerry, let me come to you. You are somebody who is using low code, who has been using low code even in your previous stint. How did you perceive low code as how do you perceive low code as a part of the strategy that you have at Town Pump, and your experience with Creator, right? What is the Town Pump story with low code?
Definitely. I think what's nice about low code is the time to market, first and foremost. When you look at traditional application development platforms along with low code, and we did see this in the fidelity space as well, is that our ability to bring something into production, could take weeks, not months, if not longer, to bring something into play. The other piece, what I like about it, is the maintenance side as well. And as we talk about, additional apps to be written, a lot of times as you continue to add in the traditional development space, as you continue to add, more applications, you end up spending more on maintenance than you do on actual development.
Mm-hmm.
And what's nice about the low code, I think it keeps the maintenance down and allows you to still continue to have more hours and labor and money spent on application development. And so you don't get into a mix where all of a sudden you find out you're spending 70% of your labor on maintenance and 30% on development. You want to keep it where you have more time and money going into actually development versus just maintenance. So I think those are the two things that I like about the low code platform: time to market and keeping maintenance low.
Okay, and so can you shed some light into the key use cases that you use Zoho Creator for? What does it enable in Town Pump?
Definitely. One of the applications, or one of the first applications we had written, was for our accounts payable department.
Mm-hmm.
So you think we have hundreds of locations across the state. We get thousands of utility bills, gas and electric and cable TV and network bills, thousands of them every month, and they get allocated to different cost centers for the business side. And our financial system didn't have a good way of being able to split that up. So what was nice about Creator is that we could customize the input screen for our accounts payable department. So we could streamline that input, and then in the background it does all the allocations to all the different cost centers and creates the output file that goes into our accounting system. And so it's nice, right? Is that you could take an invoice and now you have an input screen that can match that. Kind of hard to do that in a major an ERP system to do that. So that was one of the main applications. And the other one is that for our department, we're going to we're in the process of creating an application that is specific to what we do. And also we use Service Desk Plus in another Zoho product. And one of the reasons why we selected Creator is that we wanted that product to complement Zoho's Service Desk Plus. And we feel that now we can take that extra data that doesn't fit within SDP and house that in a Creator platform and have the best of both worlds, right? So now we have all the data available to our technicians to do the support that we need, or the support we provide our business divisions, within those two platforms, and they're very well integrated.
Got it. And speed and maintenance, rather optimization in terms of effort and cost towards maintenance is always going to be a priority, right? It's never enough. So where do you see your journey with low code extending to? Where does it stand in terms of the strategy that you have? How do you see that shaping up in let's say, the next couple of years? What are your prerogatives?
I think that once we continue to mature the platforms, we want to be able to use the AI features within the platform to start to do predictive analytics.
Okay.
So we'll take information that's coming out of our ticketing system, start to load that appropriately and structure it appropriately, so we can start to do better predictive analytics than we do today. That's where we want to get. We want to get to a point where the system's telling us what to look at versus actually us trying to interpret the data. And we want to be able to spend the time creating the models and creating the correct models and the correct structure. So, the system of the application does the work for us.
Got it. All right. Thanks, Jerry, for that. Tejas, question to you. Since Jerry mentioned his town pump experience, right? I know you would have dealt with a lot of customers who have used Creator. Can share one crazy story with us, which has completely changed business for the customer?
I think generally the craziest stories usually are the evolution of kind of their adoption of the platform. Oftentimes the ones that come in looking for kind of something small, and then over time as they get more comfortable with the platform, it kind of grows into something larger. So for example, what do you call it? There was this winery out in California a couple of years ago, and these guys made a simple application just to really log, I guess, the fermentation process of grapes. I'm not a wine guy, but something they did manufacturing, distribution, the whole nine, right? So just logging, like, how many, I don't know, the pH level of grapes, whatever goes into grape fermentation processes. But it was just a logging method to really track information. And then logging turned into bottling turned into shipping turned into distribution turned into payments. And then that app over the course of maybe 3 to 5 years evolved from just simple data entry on the computer to really being like almost essentially like an ERP for that organization, that's used by like 40-50 people across different teams, drivers and warehouse workers, accounting staff, everybody. And so the craziest stories are generally the evolution, I guess, of applications. But I think some of the better ones are oftentimes not even really business use cases. Sometimes it's just fun applications that people build on their own. We have that, what do you call, internally we have that that cricket tracker thing, right? That tracks like the Indian Premier League cricket scores and games and stuff like that. That's pretty great. We do one for World Cup every couple of years. So sometimes it's the fun stuff that honestly gets people to learn and appreciate the platform a lot more. And then that knowledge is translated into solving a business process a lot better. I remember the first thing that I ever built on Creator when I joined the company a long time ago was in the Austin office. We did Thanksgiving potluck, and people were always upset that like too many of a certain item was brought, or there was too many appetizers, too many desserts, not enough mains. People just kind of didn't do it. So I built a little app that basically made sure that we had the right ratio. And when someone tried to volunteer for something, it showed what the options were. There were some logic checks in the background that basically said, oh no, too many people are bringing mashed potatoes. You can't bring that, bring something else. These are the things that we need. And that's it's a stupid example, but it's a very basic thing. Data entry, logic, notifications. People would forget their food, so they would get a reminder, the day before, the morning of, things like that. So all ends of the spectrum in terms of the things that people have built.
Great. And for me, I have been associated with low-code only for the past couple of years. And for me, the biggest takeaway from a low-code platform is the fact that it is customizable to any extent that you need. And it depends upon the platform that you're going with. Some can't handle it. But then the fact is, if you choose a good platform, you'll be able to start with one process and then build on top of that and build on top of that. And that is what gives our customers the differentiation in terms of their competitors. They can customize it to extreme levels and then drive value from there, which is the most fascinating part for me when I look at low-code platforms, when I look at Zoho Creator. Great. One final question before we get into the end of the discussion, which is, let's say I am just starting off with my low-code journey. I'm sure there will be a lot of people attending this session and viewing this session who wouldn't know where to start with. So, Jason, to you, how do I start on the journey? How do I take low code and start fiddling around with
these
it? How do
tools,
I
Zoho
use
Creator
it
being a great
to
example,
understand its
are very
potential?
easy to
How
get
do I
into,
begin?
right? They have, simple learning curves, so it doesn't take much to get into it. But you still need to have a reason to do so, right? It's not like people at work have a lot of extra time on their hands just to play around, right? So there has to be some sort of initial application that is valuable, that is something that is an excuse for, one person or a small team to get up to speed on the tool. And so some of the examples you're talking about, they may just be simple examples, but the sorts of business business apps that we've seen that are very common are like time slip apps, right? If you have to record your time, many industries, consulting and lawyers and all, they have to keep track of how much time they spend on each client, and it's always a big headache to do that, right? And so coming up with an app that meets your company's needs, that can be a great example, because it's not just one department; it could be many different departments, and you want them all to do it the same way. So having a single app that meets the needs of the organization, that's a great example. But it could be anything. We've seen process management apps; those are very common. Data entry apps of various sorts, those are common. And as the example Jerry mentioned, essentially a front end to some sort of existing enterprise app or legacy app, that's also very common as well, where the app functionality is meeting your needs, but the user interface isn't, and you can often address that with a low-code tool as well.
Got it. Jerry, your take on that? How does someone start? If you were to start right now, what would you do?
It's a great question. And, my experience with it is that, I have some, development experience in my past, some of my past roles. But when I wanted to look at Zoho Creator, to me, it was really an after hours activity. To Jason's point, is that you have your day job, and sometimes it's tough to fit into the day job. So for me, it was a case of getting a single user license and, taking a look at it, becoming familiar with it. And then I took the Zoho developer course. I think it was like 4 sessions, and that was a great overview of just reinforcing what I looked at and what I had learned and what I had read. And I think with probably like 6 or 7 hours of just reading and understanding the application, and then taking, I think about 10 hours of the developer class, I was up and running. And still, there's great resources, on the Zoho site, which is great. As I start to look at, and you try to get one thing done, and it takes a little while to understand exactly how Zoho does it, maybe versus other applications. Kind of like learning a different language, from English to Spanish, right? As you look at the different tools. That's what it was. It was probably 2 months of reading, research, and training, and we're up and running.
Great. Okay. In fact, that takes me back to a conversation that I was having with one of our clients, and it was an interview sort of thing. And towards the end, I asked the same question, and he said, always start small and scale fast. Smaller use cases, something that you can get hang of it. And by you, I mean, it can be your entire team as well. Start from there and then build on top of that. Try pushing the limits. What more can you add to it? And that basically gets you started on the journey. And before you know, it becomes much more meaningful in terms of what the value it delivers and the effort you're putting into it. So that's probably a good place to start. Great. This has been fascinating. We'll get into Q&A pretty soon next. But before that, a quick poll. I know a 40-minute session is not something that can give you full perspective around low-code, Zoho Creator, etc. So I would love to know if you would like to talk to our low-code experts to understand this further. This will give us a clear idea. Again, I mentioned before people joined in that in the handout session, there a section on the left-hand side of your screen, there are a few collaterals in terms of how do you go about low-code application development, CIO's guide for low-code, and also Gartner Magic Quadrant for enterprise low-code application platforms, which will give you a fair amount of fair perspective into where the industry is. Feel free to explore that. I'll keep this open for another 10 seconds, and then we can get into the Q&A. And we have had some questions coming in already. All of you who would have any questions based on what we discussed, feel free to shoot that in. We'll take questions for about 10 minutes, and then we'll wrap this up. All right. Thank you for responding to the poll. This is really helpful. Okay, let's move into the Q&A part of it. We have a couple of questions already. I'll read out the questions, and some of it is addressed specifically. So I'll read out the question, and then they can respond. First one is to Tejas. The question is, I'm just reading it out, all right? So on cultural aspect of the people in the organization, how often should we infuse training things change every day, and how to drive that in people that they are ready for new changes every year, sometime within few months. And I think it takes a lot more perspective considering the fast shift that we had to do at the beginning of the pandemic. So Tejas, all yours with respect to culture. How do you make people ready for the change that will happen?
I guess infusing training. I mean, at a basic level, maybe we're talking about product stuff. Maybe we're talking about just kind of changing a shift of mentality. Ideally, people just need to feel comfortable with, especially when it comes to probably these low-code tools and introducing new, essentially developers to the fray. Not being afraid to fail is always important, right? Like your first iteration is not going to be perfect. And building off what Jerry said, that time to market is good in multiple ways. And the second half of time to market is rapid iteration. So your first version almost always, for lack of better terms, sucks. And having a low-code platform is meant to evolve over time. So like weekly, daily changes, changing a field, changing your workflow, all these kind of things. You should be constantly looking for that feedback loop and never expecting that your first version is going to be the one you guys end up using. So that iteration part definitely helps. And then I guess, yeah, that kind of correlates to maybe the cultural aspect in terms of just not being able to fail and just always be looking for feedback and ways to improve is good. I think that may answer the question. Maybe not. I don't know.
No, I'm sure it does, and we can provide further clarification. Jason, your take on that? You would have seen a lot of organizations coming up, right? So,
Sorry, you were breaking
your
up. Could
take
you say
on
it again?
how do you enable change management when using a platform like low-code? Oh, yeah. Your take on the same question in the same sense, change management. How do you deal with that?
Well, change
Especially
management
when the market is
can be
dynamic and
sort of
there
a
are changes
complex,
happening every
onerous
often. How
set
do you
of
prepare
processes in an
people to deal with
organization.
that?
For instance, if you're an ITIL organization, change management is part of the ITIL approach, and it can have many different steps and many different checkpoints and different teams that are responsible for different things. So it's a very heavyweight kind of notion. But that kind of heavyweight approach to change management is not particularly agile, does not lend itself to the democratization that we were talking about, democratization of application creation, doesn't really lend itself to the agile iterative approach to building apps that is the modern way of doing things anyway. So change management in a low-code environment is much more light touch, right? It's really about the guardrails, as Ted just mentioned, ensuring that that the overall efforts are aligned with business needs and not overly redundant. But really, you're empowering the individual stakeholders to take a greater role with how the applications are being built and used in the organization. So there's less of a change management overhead that is needed. And so it's important for the organization to realize that change management is now much more lightweight and you really can expect people to do a lot of it on their own. And now you just need to have the overall coordination that would be necessary, but it's not the sort of heavy-handed process-centric approach that ITIL recommends, for example.
Got it. Jerry, question to you. How did you go about it, in the sense that you did mention that you basically took up the skills required to build applications quite fast, and you started small. But then as you scale up, right, do you see, what are your take in terms of how your organization, how your employees are reacting to the changes that are being implemented?
I almost go back to the slide where you talked about the 3 key challenges for digital transformation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think number 1, you have to be able to articulate the opportunity. And so that's, I think, where we're at right now, is that how do we articulate the opportunities that are out there for the platform? Number 2, how do we educate? Find out who is going to be interested and who do we educate and how do we educate? And then number 3 is implement.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as we can address those 3 pieces of it, I think that brings us, or kind of articulates, our journey. Once we get past the articulate phase, and people really have the leverage to say, wow, I'd like that and I want it.
Mm-hmm.
I never want it to get to a point where we say you need it. I want to get to a point where the end users say we want it. And until we get there, we usually don't move forward.
That's really nice. All right. Another question that has come up is with respect to privacy. Are low-code application development platforms safe? How do you handle privacy and security? Tejas, I think you can start with it.
Privacy, security. I mean, at Zoho, we take privacy extremely important. It's one of the really big things. I'm sure we can probably post a link in the chat about our privacy information. But long story short, we don't have any trackers on our website. We don't share your information with anybody. We don't have any advertising in our products. So privacy-wise, I would say, go as far as to say, without tooting our own horn, you're probably not going to find a lot better than us in that regard. And then security obviously is pretty important too, and something that maybe people don't look into as much. But generally, you can tell that from maybe the number of certifications that somebody has. And so we've got a couple pages that have all the security information for it. But I guess there's two types of security really when it comes to low-code apps. Maybe I'll take it a step back that way. One is platform level security. So what does Zoho do in terms of data security? And in that regard, we'll send out a link for information. But then there's security and privacy for the applications that users are building, and that's equally important, right? You don't want to make sure that, or you need to make sure that as an application developer, is that app I'm building secure? Is the data private? Are the integrations in place? If you're operating in a place maybe in Europe or California or certain places that have stricter privacy regulations, is your app following those regulations? If someone puts a remove my information request, does it get removed from your low-code app? That's some of the burden that kind of comes on the organization that's using the platform in order to enforce it. Same way with making sure that the data is not leaked and your credentials and all that stuff. So I mean, broadly speaking, when you talk about privacy and security, there's always, especially with low-code platforms or any application platform for that matter, there's what the vendor does, which is, I would say, broadly speaking, probably pretty good. Otherwise, they wouldn't be trusted. But then there's you as the developer. What are you doing to ensure that privacy and security? And that's the second half that I think gets overlooked, or maybe a lot of focus isn't on, which is probably where the IT team and the governance comes in a little bit more.
Got it. And Jerry, how do you deal with privacy and security? I'm sure that will be at the top of your concern, right? Especially when you are consolidating data that are critical to your organization. So how do you go about that? What's your trust point?
Well, if we're talking just on the creator side, we haven't got to a point where we're inputting any data that I would consider PII, personal identifiable information. So some of the security stuff that was mentioned really at this point for us is not applicable. When we do get to a point where we're inputting data that would start to look at to be confidential or restricted type information, then at that point we would start looking at the tool and definitely a much more detailed fashion to make sure that it is secured. At this point, I would consider the data that we have as more internal information. So outside of just standard access security, we haven't gone down that road yet.
Got it. All right. Thanks. And one final question, and this is to Tejas again, and this is very specific to Creator. Is it feasible to create, Kavita is asking this, is it feasible to create an app with Creator that gets data from multiple SaaS vendors and in-house built with other Zoho Creator apps, as well as, and finally show dashboards to make decisions from these various data lakes?
I feel like that question is planted. Yeah, of course. Such a good
It's not actually.
because it's everything that we do. So, a great question to pick at the end. But yeah, for sure, the answer is 1000%. Yeah, we connect with about, the number is always changing, but it's probably 400, maybe 500, give or take, SaaS products right now. Pretty much any business SaaS software out there, and even on-premise connections can be made as well, in terms of pulling information all into Creator. And then we also have another tool called Zoho Analytics, which is a BI tool, so kind of similar to maybe Power BI or Tableau, that kind of thing. So depending on, if you're kind of working with that data from multiple sources, Creator is going to be a little bit better choice for you. And then there's also this analytics tool where if you're just trying to analyze information and make data lakes, then the analytics tool is going to be good for you. But far and away, the answer is yeah, and it's super easy. Just it's not like you got to build API integrations or anything like that. They're all pre-built connectors. You just log in, authenticate, and that data is good to go. So yeah.
Thanks, Tejas, for that. I promise it was not planted, though. All right, we are done with our time over here. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time. And if you have any questions, I know there are a lot of questions that we haven't taken, but we will come back to you offline on that one. And if you have any other further question to check with us, feel free to drop in an email on this email ID. It's mike.a@zohocorp.com. And it was a pleasure having you guys over here, talking after almost a year around the next steps that will help us flourish our business from survival mode, right? That was the whole intention, and I hope you enjoyed the session. Once again, thank you very much, Jason, Jerry, and
Thank you.
Tejas. It was a pleasure picking your brains. That's what I'm always keen on and looking forward to. And I hope we get to talk again soon. Thank you very much, and stay safe, everyone.